All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Sara Hey, and I am with Bob Clements International. And today we are going to be visiting about coaching versus managing. What we're doing this for, if you haven't heard or you're going, how in the world did I end up here watching this training session today, is we are preparing as a group for the GIE+EXPO this year. I'm going to be doing a session at the GIE+EXPO about managing different personality styles and how do you take a team who's different than you and continue to move them along the same path in the same direction. And so we're going to talk about that at the GIE+EXPO, and I hope you join me there. But before we get to that, I think one of the things that's important for us to visit about is the difference between coaching versus managing. Now, you don't have to watch this session to come to my session at the GIE+EXPO. And also, you don't have to, if you don't watch this session and come to the expo, that's still okay as well. But this is some back-end training so that when you come to the session at the expo, that you walk in and you have this baseline so that we can have a conversation on a deeper level about what's going on. So that's what we're going to talk about today, the difference between coaching versus managing. Because if you have been an employee, an owner, a manager, whatever it is for any amount of time, you know there's a difference. But how you look at that difference and understand that difference can be very different. And so we're going to put a baseline in place for our conversation that we have at the expo this year. Okay, so we're going to talk about coaching and managing and the difference between the two of them. All right, so the first thing that I think everybody can kind of relate to is a bad manager. If you're like me, my first manager was a bad manager. I worked at Build-A-Bear Workshop for my first job, other than working in the family business as child labor. Thanks, Mom and Dad. But other than that, my first job was at 14, and I worked at Build-A-Bear Workshop, and my manager was a terrible manager. Now, I bet you can think of a time when you've had a terrible manager. Now, if you're in family business, don't go tell Mom and Dad they're terrible managers. That's a bad idea. All right, but when we think about a bad manager, I think there are three things that typically stick out to people when we think about what a bad manager actually is. Now, the first thing that I think of when I think of a bad manager is someone who micromanages. Now, if you're anything like me, when somebody starts micromanaging me or micromanaging something that I'm working on, it's probably one of the biggest deflators to myself and what I'm working on. Now, you're probably like me, but what we know is that when a manager feels like things are out of control, they start micromanaging. That's typically what happens. A manager feels at some point like they have lost control of a project or something that they're working on, something that their employees are working on, and they start micromanaging. Now, if you're listening to this and you go, Sara, I micromanage sometimes, I get it. I understand it's part of it, but when we realize some of these qualities in ourselves, it puts us in this place where we can move forward. We can go and say, hey, this is not the kind of manager I want to be. And so micromanaging, I think, is one of those first signs that if we see in ourselves can be a warning sign to us, that yellow flag that comes up and says, okay, I feel out of control in some area. I need to figure out what it is and address it so that I can enable my people to do what I actually hired them to do. And so that's the first thing. A bad manager typically micromanages their people. The next thing a bad manager does is communicates very poorly. You know, when I worked at Build-A-Bear Workshop, this happened regularly. There were not clear instructions about what I needed to do. And I left every day feeling frustrated because I didn't know what was expected of me. I didn't know how I was doing against this unmet expectation. Now, if you have been a manager for any amount of time, I guarantee you there's been bad communication in one way or the other. But if we want to identify what a bad manager looks like, not communicating clearly and effectively with your team consistently, it's a hallmark trait. And so when we think about what it is that we can do better as a manager, if we look at our communication style with our people, it will move not only us forward, but ultimately our team forward, which is what our goal is. Now, the next hallmark trait of a bad manager is that they motivate with fear. Now, this is the manager who comes in every day and they say, well, if you don't do this, you're fired, right? They may be saying it in joking, But in reality, the employees are understanding that in this way that they're not actually joking. When you motivate someone with fear, when fear is at the core of what you're doing to motivate your people, we're not effectively taking care of the resources of our people that we have been entrusted with. So when we think about a bad manager has three qualities. Number one, they micromanage because they feel out of control. Number two, they don't communicate effectively, and your employees feel lost and misunderstood. And number three, they motivate with fear because they don't know how to understand and motivate their people in ways that actually produce results. Sure, fear produces a result for a moment, but it is not a long-term lasting result, which is what we're ultimately trying to get to as a manager. Now, as we move through this conversation about the differences between coaching and managing, I think there's something we've got to understand. In the role you play in your dealership, there are times that you need to be a manager, and there are times that you need to be a coach. Now, what's the difference? What's the difference between a manager and a coach, and how do you decide what time you need to be each one? Now, I love to use the analogy of a hat. There are different times we need to put on a baseball cap versus a sun hat, right? Each of those things do the same thing. They're focused on keeping the sun out of our eyes and off of our head. But how they do that and what they do to make that happen look very different. So there are times in your dealership where you need to be a manager and you need to be a coach. Think about it this way. If you like baseball at all, you've probably seen a baseball manager. What does a baseball manager do? I'm from Kansas City. We've got the Kansas City Royals, and we've got a baseball manager for that team. A baseball manager's role is very different than a football coach's role. Would you agree? Like, as you think about this, what a manager does is different than what a coach does. And just like that, we have to adjust our managing versus coaching in our dealership. And there's going to be a time we've got to put on our baseball coach hat, our coach hat. But there are going to be times as an owner that or a manager that we have to put on our manager hat. And so when we think about these two different things, it creates clarity, because when we think about what a manager does, is a manager manages processes. A manager is focused on processes where a coach is focused on developing people. So let's dive into this as we talk about a manager. So what's the most critical job functions as a manager? If you have a title manager in your job title right now, which probably most of you do, what does it mean to be a manager? So if a manager is focused on processes, what does that look like? Well, the first thing we know what a critical role of a manager is that a manager needs to focus on planning. You've got to answer the question, what are you trying to do? Maybe you're in the service department. What are you trying to do? What is the point of the process that you are managing in the service department? If you are in the service department and you are a service manager, what you are trying to do is sell all of the time you have bought for that day. You are trying to keep your technicians efficient in turning a wrench all day long. That's what you're trying to do. If you are a parts manager, you are trying to make sure that the process is not broken, that you have the parts you need when your customers need them, or when your biggest customer, the service department, needs them. If you are a general manager, what you are trying to do is keep the dealership moving forward, keep cash flow coming through the dealership, and keep all of the departments moving in the direction they need to go. That is the first thing we've got to think about as a manager. The first thing we do as we have our baseball manager hat on, if you think about this like a baseball manager, when a baseball manager comes, he is not on the sidelines giving advice consistently. No, he came up with a plan. He came up with a plan so that he could win the game, which is what he is trying to do. Just like that baseball manager, I encourage you to make this assumption. What is it that you are trying to do as a manager? The next thing a manager does is staffing. Who do you need is the question that you need to ask. If this is what I'm trying to do, who do I need to do it? Now, you could say that you're a service manager and have no technicians, but you would have a problem on your hands because you would have no one to carry out the process you are trying to do. The same holds true as a parts manager or sales manager. As a sales manager, the process that you're watching is activity. And if you do not have any salespeople to actually do the activity, you're not truly a manager. So who do you need to make what you are trying to do actually happen? Think about our baseball manager again. When a baseball manager comes and makes the decision, we are trying to win, that's what we're trying to do, who do I need in my lineup to make that happen? They make strategic choices about who they need on their team to make what they're trying to do happen. And the same thing holds true for you as an owner or manager as well. So what are you trying to do, number one? And number two, who do you need to make that happen? Now, the third piece and the third most vital part of being a great manager is the oversight. Are you on track? So let's say that as a manager, you're a service manager, and you say this week, I want our service department to have 85 to 90% recovery, right? Of all of the time that I bought as a service manager, I want to sell 85 to 90% of it. Okay, that's a great goal. That's what we're trying to do, our planning, right? I know I have bought time from 3 technicians, so I need to make sure that I'm selling 85 to 90% of their time this week, okay? I've got the people in place that I need. I know where I'm going, 85 to 90% efficient, right? Or recovery. And then I know I have the people in place, my technicians, who are going to do the work and fulfill the process. And then oversight, are you on track? How are you focusing on making sure that you are moving forward? Because as a manager, I think we get this wrong. We say, okay, as a manager, when my people have a problem, they're just going to come to me and talk to me about it. No, 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 my friends. No, your job as a manager is to make sure the process is seamless. And once you get this process moving, your job is just to manage the process. That's what your job is to do. Just like a baseball coach, if they had their baseball coach or manager, their baseball manager hat on, the conversation they would say is our ultimate goal is to get to the World Series. For us to do that, our ultimate goal of planning, we're going to get to the World Series. I need to have these great people in place. And we have to track consistently not only the performance of the players, but the performance of the team to make sure we are getting where we are going. That is your job as a manager. Your job is to manage the process. You don't see baseball managers on the sidelines giving batting advice in the midst of the game. That's not what it is. That's the job of a coach. What a manager does is focuses on the goal, focuses on the process, and make sure that you're moving towards where you need to go consistently. All right, so if this is what a manager does, what does it look like for a coach? What does a coach do, and how do we understand this? Now, again, I'm from Kansas City. We have the Kansas City Chiefs here, and we have Coach Andy Reid, who coaches the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, Coach Andy Reid handles his job different than what the Royals manager handles his job, right? They're two very different things. The way that you coach a football team and you manage a baseball team are very fundamentally different. So there's 3 things in my mind that are the most critical functions of a coach. The first thing is encouragement. We as a coach have to be there encouraging our people along the way, saying, you can do this. This is something that you can do and you can move forward. Do you think that in the midst of halftime for a Chiefs game or whatever team you cheer for, the coach takes the players back to the locker room and says, well, that sucked. Probably going to be downhill from here, boys. No, they don't. They get back in that locker room and they say, you can do this. I know we're down right now, but I know that you are capable of winning this game. Your job as a coach is to find ways to encourage your people. Man, to your technicians, man, I know you got upside and down in this job, but this does not represent who you are. Man, I know you feel like this is a really tough job, but I know you can figure this out. Maybe it's at the parts counter. Somebody came up and had a really terrible experience. The customer just berated your parts person. You as a coach go up to them and say, man, that was a tough situation, but you handled that so well. I want the rest of our people to understand how well you handled that because you did it with an exceptional level of customer service in a really hard situation. The first thing you've got to focus on as a coach is encouraging your people. Your job as a coach is to keep your people moving forward through the personal side, not focusing on the process and just fixing the problems with the process. That's the job of the manager. The next thing you've got to keep in mind as you think about your job function as a coach is development. How do you get better? You better believe that anytime you watch a football game, it is all being filmed, and the players and the coach are going to go back and watch all of the footage. They are going to dissect everything that happened and say, how do we get better at this? How do we move forward? How can we take these skills that we already have and improve on them? As a coach, you should be looking at the training opportunities for your people. How can you take the people that you have, which are your most valuable asset, and make them better? Because the moment we start focusing on improving our people and growing them into the people we need to be, we are truly coaching them and moving them along. But the moment that we forget that core piece of our job is to develop our people, the minute that we forget that all the things that are going around us, swirling around us on a day-to-day life in the dealership, we feel like that's more important than developing our people, we have missed our role as a coach. But you have the power to change this. You have the power to say, I am going to be a coach, and as a coach, I am going to come alongside you and find ways that we can grow you. Find ways that we can make you better at what you do, because in the end, it makes a difference, not only for your people, but for your dealership as a whole. Now, the third piece of this is instruction. Your job as a coach is to help guide your people on what the next play is. What is the next thing that you need them to be doing? Where are you going, right? Where are you going? How are we going to not only develop our people, but help them move there? Think about this again. If you were Coach Andy Reid and you are coaching the Chiefs team, and they didn't know what the next play was, what their goal was, where they were going, right? What would be the point of the game? If everybody got out there and there was no direction about how to work together as a team, there was no direction about what our goal was and where we were trying to go, what kind of game would that be? Probably a chaotic one that they wouldn't win. I mean, we are from Kansas City, so we're used to not winning, but even more so, probably be a chaotic one that we wouldn't win. And so as a coach, I encourage you to take a step back and look at your job functions. How much time are you spending managing the process versus how much time are you spending coaching your people? And is that what it should be? I would encourage you to say that managing the process should only take you 15 to 20% of your time on a daily basis, where coaching your people should take the majority of your time, probably up to 80 to 85% of your time. And how does that look today? Because when we think about the differences between coaching and managing and understand how that relates to our people, we will transform our dealership. All right, so this is going to be a crucial part of our conversation. Another piece of our conversation that we're going to have at GIE+EXPO is going to be around personality. So if you have gotten all the way through this and you are planning on being at GIE+EXPO, I want you to send me an email because I'm going to send you a personality assessment to take. Now, this assessment is going to take you about 15 to 20 minutes, and it's going to be another piece of our conversation for Expo. So if you have gotten to this point, thank you for hanging with me. I have you shoot me an email, and it just says Sara, so it's just SARA, at bobclements.com, BOBCLEMENTS.com. And I want you to put in the subject line, Expo, okay, or GIE+EXPO. And I'm going to send you a link for a personality assessment that we're going to dive into a little bit deeper at the GIE Expo. All right, thank you guys so much. I can't wait to see you in just a few short months in October in Louisville. And if you have any other questions along the way, shoot me an email. I'd love to visit with you. All right, thanks, guys.